So for this video, we're going to be going over the specific poly sculpt tools that exist in Maya. And there's in a different video, a more practical demonstration with something that's not just a couple of primitives. But in order to show off these tools, I have both a rounded object and a flat one, just to kind of show how they work. And yes, I know it's a sphere, and I'm always saying don't use spheres. I just wanted something that had some like a curve to it. And both of these have been created with quite a lot of resolution. These tools do work on lower res stuff as well. They have purposes there, as you'll see in the other video, but at least for right now, we can get like the higher resolution simply gives us a better way to see what's happening. So the sculpting tools are under this other tab. We've lived under this one for so long, but there are others. And these first three are kind of the ones I use the most, and then they start to get like really specific in here, and then there's a useful one right here. So that's kind of the layout there, and I do have a link in nearby to the Maya, the Autodesk list of these things. So I mean, you can hover over them and see that this one what it will do. It doesn't give the name of it, but it'll tell you approximately what's going to do. But there's more specific descriptions up online. Okay, so this first one right here is called the Sculpt. Basically, Maya used to have one Sculpt tool with a few different options, and then it broke it out into a whole bunch of different tools. And so, there we go. So the way the Sculpt tool works, actually, let me reset it. I was tinkering with these earlier, so I want it to look like what yours would look like. Oh, well, all right. We're already going to have to make the brush a little bit smaller. So I'm middle mouse dragging left and right to make the brush smaller. Um, so the Sculpt tool is meant to basically pull vertexes out away from the mass. And if I double click on this tool, we can see how it's defining it. So the size is the size of the brush. The strength, which we're going to turn way down, is exactly what it sounds like. It's the strength. It's how much it's pulling it. And then the direction, it says average normal. So that's the default. And that works pretty well for our purposes. I'm probably not going to change it today. But what that does is it decides, all right, on average, the normals are going of what we're pulling are in what direction. And it basically pulls the vertexes away from the surface. So all of these tools that we're using are on a vertex by vertex basis. If I come over to here, and use the Sculpt tool, you saw that I think I have to select. Yeah, you have to select it beforehand. You'll see that everything I pull away is going up. Because the first time I went over it, that's the only direction that existed. Now that other stuff is happening, there's going to be a little bit more side-to-side action going on because there are now vertexes and faces pointing towards the sides. But it's a very different reaction than you get over here. But it basically pulls the vertexes away from the surface. Now, the brush itself, as I said before, we can double click on it, and I'm going to actually move it over here. This will, no, there we go. Don't dock anywhere. This is going to stay open and actually change with whatever tool we have. So if you prefer to like see your options, you can leave this open. You can also dock it in there as you just saw. But yeah, size is middle mouse drag left and right, and it will do that. If you middle mouse drag up and down, that right there is the strength. So if I turn this way down, you see how everything's like pulling just a little bit, just a little bit. Looks more severe when you have a smaller brush though, right? Like that looks like more, because it's a smaller brush. So when I use that small strength over here, it raised the whole thing up a little bit. All right, but we're gonna undo to get rid of that. All right, so middle mouse dragging like this will give you a larger brush to work with, and middle mouse dragging up and down will change the strength. Now, you can see how this can get a little bit away from you if you're not careful. So the tendency once you have an actual model can sometimes be to bring all the settings down, the strength especially, to make sure that you're not going too crazy. And the other thing is if you need to, symmetry does work with this, right? So for any of the models that we've done so far that has symmetry too, I'm not turning that on right now, but as long as you have a perfectly symmetrical model in the first place, you can use symmetry with these tools just as much as the other ones. All right, but I'm going to pull some of these up a lot. I'm going to kind of mess it up a little on purpose for the next tool. So the next tool over is called the Smooth tool. And this is basically a tool to average the vertexes. I'm going to turn this strength way down. The strength is, yikes. There we go. We'll see if it's enough when I start using it. But the smooth tool is going to average the vertices. So you can see I've got like a whole hot mess over here. Oh, I guess I do need to turn the strength up a little bit more. See how it's kind of getting rid of some of those sharper edges. It's smoothing things out a little bit. There we have it. So it's looking at all the vertexes that are under the brush and it's averaging them out. Now, if I had this turned way up, basically erases what you're doing. So we can turn this to, it also depends on the size of what you're working on. So these numbers are kind of absolute within the world. If you have a really large model where everything is, like 10 times the size of what I'm working on here, you're going to have larger numbers. So the size of your model is going to change what these numbers are. All right, but the smooth tool, kind of take the edges off the shape. There we go. Kind of make things work out a little bit better. All right, now, hang on, I'm going to pause this so I can mess the things up a little bit. So this next tool works really well in a practical model because the problem it solves comes up in a practical model a lot. It's hard to mimic on just me squashing things around here. But it's called the Relax tool. And the Relax tool will average the vertexes across the shape without affecting the shape itself. So let's say this is the shape you want for some reason, but obviously this is not the edge loop situation that we'd want. Now there's a limit to, turn the strength up a little bit. There's a limit to how much this can fix things because in this case, this is nowhere near where this needs to be, right? But you can see that it is affecting these because there are quite a few of them in there. And so you can see it averaging these out a little bit. So there's a limit to how much this can fix stuff. If you don't have anything going out there in the first place, and it is going to affect the shape a little bit. It's trying not to, but I mean, if I'm pointing it at something like this, right, it is going to affect some of the shape. If I come over here, there we go. I can use G to bring the tool back up so I can kind of hotkey my way through. All right, it's going to do its best to kind of fix some of the spacing I have in here. Again, though, this thing right here, there's nothing to fix with that. Whereas like with some of these, they were a little bit stretched out and there was no transition before from here to here. And what this relax tool does is instead of going directly from, things that are changed to things that are not changed, it can kind of smooth out that transition a little bit. So if you want to see this an action somewhere that makes a little bit more sense, the practical example will have a better kind of take on this. The last one, I guess, that I want to show you, it's called the grab tool. It basically takes specific vertexes. I'm wiggling my mouse back and forth, and we can kind of specify a little bit more the direction that we're pulling stuff in. It's similar to another video on the soft select tool. This is a little bit more intuitive, a little bit less specific. So you gotta kind of, point and click to where you think you want to go, and it'll go there. But you're also dealing with 3 dimensions, which means it may not exactly go where you think it's going to, because I can go to the left and I can go to the right, but how do I determine, and up and down on my mouse is determining the y-axis here. How do I determine the z-axis? And then once I grab this again, it's a different, do you know what I mean? Like there's only, we only have 2 dimensions on our screen to work with, so it is difficult to get something to pull in 3 dimensions specifically. But this is basically taking the center of these and pulling them out from the surface. And you can see that I'm almost putting myself in an orthographic-ish view to get it to work the best because of the way it works specifically with my hand. Eliminating one axis is one of the ways we can kind of help our case a little bit. Let's bring this back down. And then go to the other side, bring it back down a little bit. There we go. All right, so we can kind of repair the fact that I stuck that out there a little bit, and then use the relax tool to fix where those edge loops are. Right, so now that this isn't quite so far out there, that relax tool is making a little bit more sense. There we go. And then we could even then combine it with the smooth tool a little bit, because there's like a little bit of bumps. This is a really big brush. All right. Now there's a lot of other tools in here, and they all have some very silly sounding names like foamy and spray and repeat. And they have some very specific uses. Oh no, wait, wrong mesh. That actually, because the setting is so strong and the brush is so big, it kind of looks like that other tool. According to the spray, it stamps an image along the stroke randomly. Cool. Or no, wait, was that foamy? I'm not even sure. Softly lift a surface. Except if the strength is very strong, you're not softly lifting anything. So there are some other specific tools that you can look into. A lot of these are very much a try them and click around with them, and that will make more sense than me telling you what they mean. Because you have to get hands-on experience with this. So don't just watch the video. Make sure that you are like trying this out at some point. Do be warned that this is a little bit more resource intensive than your usual modeling. You see all these vertexes that are moving around. That's a lot to be moving around. So if you don't have both of these at the same time, or shut down your browsers, this will take a little bit more. So don't just use it on your model unless you've saved your model, unless you have saved as your model, which we'll get into a little bit. But this can be a little bit more resource intensive. Now, aside from all of the various sculpting tools that you can explore here, there are a couple of other specific things we can look at. And one of them is how to make sure we don't mess up whatever we like about this, because obviously, we're sculpting and maybe I'm trying to affect something over here and it accidentally moves some of these vertexes that, and I don't want that to happen. There's something called a freeze. And we turn this on. Whatever we paint is going to stay put. And you can see that it has like a fall off on it too. So it has a sort of gradation. So when I do that, there we go, takes care of that there. And so then when I bring this tool up, it can move these, but unless I do this on purpose, it is going to have a bit of a gradation between where you said stop and where you're trying to go. So you shouldn't have too much in the way of sharp edges, even if these vertexes get affected a little bit. But it can preserve the shape you have here while still working on other pieces. And then when you're done, I grab the freeze tool again, I hit Control, and I can erase it to turn it off. Or, let's see if this works. Unfreeze all. There we go. Flood will turn the whole thing to freeze, and then this will unfreeze all. So if there was a small amount you wanted to take off freeze, you could hold down Control, and you see this turns to white. There we go. Undo that, leaves that. If you want everything to be unfrozen, click the Unfreeze All button. All right, we're going to close this now because there is one last thing, and that is, what if for some reason you needed some part of this to go like back to zero, back to where the shape was? Because there is no tool in here that's like, oh, go back to the sphere. Not at this point, right? Maybe on this flat one, there would be a way to kind of get it to do that, because so much of it is still, what the heck? There it is. So much of this is still flattened. Nope, now see, it's hitting the edges. So even on this one, where the majority of it is still pretty flat, it's still gonna not put it back to a perfect plane. It can get close. It can, there we go, right? But that's only happening because so much of this is still a plane, and it's also taking forever, and it's messing up this. And if I go over here, it'll do that. So how do we actually get things back to zero without mucking up other stuff? Well, this is a little bit technical, but basically on the shape node for this, not here, I know that's where we're always going for the shape node, but actually under the channel box, the shape node is also listed here. And if you go into vertex mode and drag select a bunch of vertices, this is what you get. It tells you what the inputs are for like the history, which in our case, by the way, sculpting tools don't really give any history except for just creating a couple of color sets in the first place. But then it says CVs, click to show. Each one of these vertexes has a number assigned to it. This is the X, Y, and Z of those vertexes relative, this is key, relative to what the original shape was. And if I drag select a whole bunch of them and hit 0 and hit enter, somewhere, there he goes, some of them go back to 0. If I drag select these columns, which gets every single vertex, and hit 0, enter, it returns all the vertexes back to where they were originally. Now, this works out okay for here because that's the original primitive. I believe if we wanted this to work, if you were sculpting another model, you would actually have to delete history first. Otherwise, it would bring them back down to wherever they were when the history first started, which if you started with, a cube somewhere, it might not work out so well. But yeah, this is one sort of like last ditch way, oops, to get things back to 0. And these are always here. This setting is always here whether you've sculpted or not. You can select a vertex and it will have its, let's select one that's been changed. It'll have these. But again, these are the changes relative to where they were when they started, not relative to the world. They don't understand that. The object, the whole object understands that concept, that it exists here and here relative to the grid. And if I put this here, it moves down the grid, right? There we go. But the individual vertexes, they only understand that relative to the shape where they started, wherever that was. So it doesn't matter what kind of shape you start with. And once you add in all these, then it creates where they are. That's their starting point, and that's their 0, 0, 0, right? So it's sort of objects. The components have an object space, and then this object has a world space to it. All right, so that's the rundown of the tools. As I said before, I'm going to have a link to this page from Autodesk Maya. It just lists all of the various ones, so you can know what they're called, wax and scrape and everything. And they'll go over if there is one, a hotkey, and it goes through all of these ones here, describes them, gives a kind of more technical terms of what they're going to be doing to your model.